Good morning. Thank you all for joining us as community members and organizations today on this hot summer in Phoenix to disclose our community reactions to and our critiques to the recent Department of Justice report on the City of Phoenix and the Phoenix Police Department. As we all know, this Department of Justice report is the result of a nearly three-year-long investigation into the City of Phoenix and its violent and deadly police department. My name is Kathy Brody. That's Kathy Brody. I am a criminal defense attorney in private practice here in Phoenix at the law firm of Mitchell, Stein, Carey, Chapman, MITCHELLSTEIN. Carey is CAREY and Chapman CHAPMAN. As I said, I'm a criminal defense lawyer. I'm one of the many criminal defense lawyers from this community who represented protesters who were subject to targeting and political prosecution by the Phoenix Police Department and the Maricopa County Attorney's Office in 2020 during the protests for Black Lives here in Phoenix. And we're gathered here today at the Phoenix Police headquarters because of the significance of this moment and the significance of the location in this moment. This location is the site of past protests. It's also the site of countless acts of violence by the police, and it's the headquarters of one of the deadliest and most violent police forces in this nation, and of course the subject of the Department of Justice's report. And I also want to acknowledge before I get further that this police department and where we are standing today is located on the stolen homelands of the O'odham and Piapash people. And so let me set the stage and the context for what brings us here today. And we've been waiting a long time to be here today to talk about this. So I want to lay the context for this 126-page report that the Department of Justice released last week following this nearly 3-year-long investigation. So we have been waiting. On August 5th, 2021, the Department of Justice announced that the Special Litigation Section of their Civil Rights Division was launching its pattern and practice investigation into the City of Phoenix and the Phoenix Police Department. Now that announcement in 2021 came after the Phoenix Police Department was exposed in a big scandal by the community organizations that are here today, and that scandal involved lies, corruption, and political prosecutions with the 2020 protesters in the movement for Black Lives. But those protest cases are not, and that's one of the ways I've been involved in this as a defense lawyer for those folks. But that's not the only reason that the Department of Justice gave for its pattern and practice investigation. It was here for many other reasons, and these are the reasons. The Phoenix Police Department used excessive force and uses excessive force in violation of the Fourth Amendment. The Phoenix Police Department engages in discriminatory police practices that violate the Constitution and federal law. And when I say discriminatory police practices, I mean racist police practices. The Phoenix Police Department violates the First Amendment by retaliating against individuals who are protected in expressive activity and associational activity. The city and the Phoenix Police, they respond to people with disabilities in a manner that violates the Americans with Disabilities Act. And that includes decisions about whether to detain individuals who are suffering from behavioral health disabilities. And of course, we know that Phoenix Police Department violates the rights of those people experiencing homelessness by seizing and disposing of their belongings in a manner that violates the Constitution, among other ways. And of course, it's noteworthy, we've been saying this for a long time, but it's very noteworthy that the Department of Justice chose not to include the Maricopa County Attorney's Office in its investigation, despite the County Attorney's Office role in the 2020 protest cases and that epic scandal that prompted the DOJ's investigation. And I would say, despite the many mentions in the Department of Justice report about the many times that the County Attorney's Office failed to take action when it saw what the Phoenix police were doing. And now, after nearly 3 years, the Department of Justice issued this report last week, and Kristen Clark of the department, in her own words, said that this report is historic and that those findings are severe. And we agree. In this 126 pages, the report lays out what we have known, what the community members, what the groups here have known for decades, that this Phoenix Police Department is racist and violent. And let me talk a little bit about accountability. And I know that folks here are going to be talking about that too, because during this Department of Justice investigation, the city kept telling the community that it was fully cooperating with the investigation. Fully cooperating with the investigation. But now that report makes clear that's not the case, and the city was in fact actively obstructing that investigation. The city withheld highly relevant materials, did not produce the ASU report, did not produce that 21 CP investigation report to the Department of Justice. And when those findings were released, the city hired lawyers to go to court and get protective orders to prevent their release from the public. The Department of Justice requested to attend depositions of those investigators, and the city would not let that happen. And so rather than requiring its officers to cooperate with this Department of Justice investigation, the city made that cooperation voluntary, quote, voluntary, and more than 40 officers refused to talk to the Department of Justice. 40 officers were involved in that protest response. The city even hired political operative Michael Bromwich to supposedly oversee the city's response to the investigation. And they paid Bromwich's firm more than $1 million in taxpayer money over the last 3 years. And I'm a lawyer, and I would say that not too many times that somebody pays $1 million to a lawyer to cooperate fully with an investigation. This is not behavior of a city, of a police department that has nothing to hide. And Department of Justice investigations are extremely rare. We know that. There's over 18,000 police departments in the country, and DOJ has investigated 71 of those in 30 years. That's less than half of 1%. And the investigations aren't always critical either. Of those 71 investigations, 41 resulted in consent decrees or litigation. And so we see this scathing report from the Department of Justice. It explicitly highlights now in writing not only the extreme nature of the violent and unconstitutional conduct by the police department, but that extreme nature of the police cover-up that has been going on in this city for years and decades. And so today you're going to hear from some of the organizations who've been working tirelessly to hold the police department accountable, and you're also going to hear from some survivors of police violence. And we'll give an opportunity to ask questions afterward as well. Let me introduce our first speaker. Thank you all. The first speaker that we have today is Dr. Mimi Gebramariam with Black Lives Matter Phoenix Metro.
Hi, my name is Mimi, M-I-M-I, Gebramariam, G-E-B-R-E-M-A-R-I-A-M. So, I am an advocacy organizer with Black Lives Matter Phoenix Metro. So, I would like to start by just saying, like she was just mentioning, 3 years ago, the Department of Justice opened up its investigation on the Phoenix Police Department. During this time, BLM Phoenix, Mass Liberation AZ, and various other organizations, as well as families and victims of Phoenix Police Department's violence, sat down with the DOJ and informed them that any successful resolution to their report would need to have our involvement in the development process of that resolution or any other recommendations. As we know, released in that report were various recommendations. So before they've even released those, we told them we need to be involved in the process of any of those resolutions and the development of them. So this has not happened. The DOJ has not done this, and we hope the DOJ can do better themselves, as well as the department and the city, of course. So the police department and the city have been found to be in violation of our First Amendment regarding the freedom of speech and assembly, Fourth Amendment, protections against unreasonable searches and seizures, and 14th Amendment concerning equal protection under the law. They were also found to be in violation of the Civil Rights Act of 1964, an act that our people were beat, lynched, and unjustly incarcerated for attempting to pass and uphold. I am here standing in honor of them to let you all know that enough is enough. The city of Phoenix is well aware of the excessive use of force and unjust treatment of its Black, Brown, and Indigenous communities by Phoenix Police Department, and they have failed to act substantially. Black people are 6% of the population in Phoenix, and yet are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than the rest of the 94% of this community. I'm going to repeat that again for you all. Black people are 6% of the population in Phoenix, and yet are 3 times more likely to be killed by police than the rest of the 94% of this community. So now here we are. Mayor Kate Gallego and City Council, how many more of us need to die before you act? How long are you going to let police investigate themselves and the police union to claim to have legitimate input over this process? The DOJ has proven what we have been telling you all for years about the harassment and brutalization of our communities by your police force. We need justice, we need our reparations, and we need accountability. And we need to be a part of the development of any substantial resolutions to this egregious, murderous issue. In the words of Mr. Roland Harris here, either you're with the people of this city, the most vulnerable people, or you are not. There is no middle ground. It's been 3 years too long, and we need to change. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next speaker is Roland Harris, the father of Jacob Harris, who was killed by the Phoenix Police Department in 2019.
My name's Roland Harris. It's ROLAND HARRIS. First of all, it's been 5 years that we've been fighting and trying to say that Jacob was murdered and tortured by the Phoenix Police Department by the coward Christopher Burtz, who still has a badge even after this report came out. I do want to acknowledge the Assistant Attorney General, Christine Clark, for acknowledging Jacob's murder when she spoke. I just wish she would have said his name and his true age of 19. But for you to sit there and use my son's murder as an example of what the violations that these police have done onto this community and still have these police officers still be police officers, there is no accountability. And there continues to be no accountability. I would like to see true validation of the murder and torture of my 19-year-old son. That validation does go into saying that this report was historic. I think the punishment on this Phoenix Police Department and the city of Phoenix should also be historic. I have a few demands that I would like to place onto the DOJ. First, that demand would be to give my family real justice and my son real justice, and file a lawsuit against the city of Phoenix and the Phoenix Police Department for civil rights violations, and demand restitution be paid to the families and the victims of this Phoenix Police Department in the city of Phoenix. Secondly, I demand that the Department of Justice hand its findings over to the FBI and demand criminal charges be filed against this Phoenix Police Department in the city of Phoenix for their violations. Thirdly, I demand that the Mayor Kate Gallego step down from being a mayor. Since this happened and you are culprit for these actions happening under your watch, you sat on city council as well as you sit as the mayor why this is happening. You sit here and you say that you're going to have meetings with this community again. 5 years ago, you had a meeting at Pilgrim Rest Church and you said that you promised the community that you would have meetings and make changes. Nothing's been done, so what's going to change now? I do not agree with a consent decree. A consent decree is simply asking you to make those changes. I demand that the DOJ demand that those changes be made and give you federal oversight to demand that these changes be made. I ask that the DOJ open an investigation into the Maricopa County Attorney's Office for the complicity into these murders and that these violations of these civil rights that they sat back and allowed happen. You sit here and you say that you want true justice for us. Well, true justice is giving us justice. What you're giving us is not justice. You're giving us a report right now that says that you guys were treated unjustly, that your son was murdered unjustly. But give us justice. Justice is putting these officers behind bars. Make a historic movement today and rewrite history. Come out and say that we are going to recommend criminal charges against these officers who murdered these young men. I ask that the Attorney General continue to be historic in everything that they do and send a message to all law enforcement in this country that you guys will no longer tolerate police brutality in this country. Thank you.
Thank you.
Say his name.
Jacob.
Say his name.
Jacob Harris.
Say his name.
Jacob Harris.
Say his name.
Jacob Harris. Thank you. Our next speaker today is Kyrie Wilson, a directly impacted community member who was targeted in the 2020 protest cases.
Thank you. Hi. My name is Kyrie Wilson, spelled K-H-I-R-Y-W-I-L-S-O-N, and I was politically targeted and arrested by Phoenix PD nearly 4 years ago on August 9, 2020. That day during the summer of 2020 uprising for Black Lives, I was part of the protests right here in front of the Phoenix Police Department to honor the life of another young Black teenager who was killed by police in Ferguson, Missouri, Michael Brown Jr. I stood right there joining millions of people who took to the streets all across the world and grieved for cops to stop killing us. We asked for them to stop killing us, and we were met with cops in gear and riot, mass arrest, and political prosecutions. We fought for people like Jacob Harris, like Dion Johnson, like Muhammad Mahayan. Phoenix police nearly killed me the day of my arrest. This department colluded with Maricopa County Attorney's Office to make me a political prisoner. I'm the one and only conviction that they got because they targeted me and held me without bond and then forced me into a plea deal. I caught COVID-19 inside jail, and the only way for me to save my life and everything that I worked for was me to take that plea. After I was convicted and everyone's charges were dropped because our community pushed back, it still took me over a year to get my charges dropped. MCAO didn't drop them out of the kindness of their hearts. I had to get an attorney, I had to file motions and fight again to clear my name. And even when my conviction was reversed, I still had protest charges on my background checks. I still have trauma. I still have to deal with the cops harassing me even after all of this has been said and done. The DOJ came to our city after all of Phoenix PD and MCAO's lies were exposed by journalists who had the courage to tell this story, attorneys who had the heart to fight for us, and unrelenting community organizing. The DOJ came to Phoenix because the community organized and mobilized to get these false charges dropped. It was our smoke that they saw from Washington that led them step foot right here in this city. And once they got here, the DOJ was handed more than enough evidence to prove to the city of Phoenix, its police department, and the MCAO were retaliating against protesters. And we already know why the DOJ isn't saying much about the protests that they claim to investigate. It was almost 3 years ago on the anniversary of my arrest, August 9, 2021, when we, the protesters, issued our demands directly to the DOJ. We demanded that the DOJ, 1, censor people mostly directly impact, 2, include the MCAO in the investigation because it is equally responsible for these civil rights violations, and the outcome, 3rd, of this investigation must reduce the size and the scope of PPD and the MCAO and result in reparations of our community. We let them know point blank that this investigation would be meaningless without these commitments. Did the DOJ listen to us? No, they did not. They made a decision to not commit to the demands of the directly impacted people, even though they promised this publicly. The DOJ didn't want to listen to us. They wanted to use us. They wanted us to be able to come in and say that they cleaned it up, and they made it look like police are the solution to everything that police do. And that's a lie. Just like the movie, Cover Up Kate. The DOJ is trying to convince us that they care about our rights and safety, when in fact they wasted millions of dollars to produce an incomplete report that took nearly 3 years to write and intentionally left out the MCAO. If the DOJ truly wanted to keep us safe, they would take accountability and they would implement the demands of those of us who are directly impacted by police violence. On the day after Juneteenth, as a person of color, I'm standing here right in front of the police station, the police department that tried to take my life 4 years ago. I'm here to say I'm alive. I'm alive. We're here to say no. We see through the lies of the investigation, we see through the lies of the report, and we see the lies that will come with consent decree. We aren't falling for it. And to the DOJ, it's last. The DOJ must use its power and authority to hold the city and the police department accountable. There's no way to repair the harm from these institutions, but the city does owe reparations to all of us who have been directly impacted by police violence. Instead of wasting millions on investigations the community already held and gave the DOJ the evidence to conduct, the Phoenix PD can spend some of its billion-dollar budget resolving the countless lawsuits against this violent police department. That is my time. Kyrie, KHIRYWILSON. Thank you for your time.
Thanks, Kyrie. Thank you. Our next speaker will be Joe Larios with Mass Liberation Arizona.
Hello, everyone. Thank you for being here. Joe Larios, J-O-E, Larios, L-A-R-I-O-S, and I am with Mass Liberation Arizona. And like you heard Kyrie say, not only is this report a complete regurgitation of what the community has been saying to Kate Gallego and council for over a past decade, but it's also grossly incomplete. The DOJ failed to investigate the collusion between Maricopa County Attorney's Office and the Phoenix PD to politically prosecute protesters in the 2020 uprising for Black Lives. We all know there was a coordinated effort between Phoenix PD and the Maricopa County Attorney's Office to publicly target and prosecute critics of the police. Together, they have weaponized the criminal legal system in order to intimidate, silence, and jail community organizers, activists, and demonstrators speaking out against police brutality. The majority of those slapped with false charges by the MCAO were Black and brown leaders in our community. The DOJ investigation was meant to determine whether Phoenix PD violates the First Amendment by retaliating against individuals who are engaged in protected, expressive activities. And yet you could learn more about the depth of our First Amendment violations from the politically charged reports that were aired on ABC 15 than you will get from this report. This scandal was the tipping point that prompted the DOJ to investigate in the first place. The DOJ knew again back in 2021, before they even stepped foot into Phoenix, that our city officials, the police department, and the MCAO colluded to politically target and prosecute those who marched for Black Lives in 2020. Their failure to include the Maricopa County Attorney's Office in their investigation demonstrates a short-sightedness or perhaps intentionality that is inexcusable. We must never forget that the DOJ is still a law enforcement agency, and police policing each other will never end police violence. It is glaringly obvious that the DOJ refuses to properly investigate the targeting and criminalization of protesters and protected speech here in Phoenix, because to do so would require them to criticize the actions of the current administration against those protesting this US-backed genocide in Palestine all across this country this year. There is no difference in how the state responded to the 2020 uprisings and how it is responding to the Palestinian solidarity movement today. Let's not be fooled. The DOJ's refusal to acknowledge the root causes of police violence and institutional collusion makes clear that this investigation and its subsequent report is nothing more than political theater, and it reminds us that solutions are generated by the community and not cops. Thank you.
Thanks, Joe.
Lack of affordable housing, deadly heat, a water shortage, drug overdose, lack of accessible healthcare resources, and lack of living wage jobs. While at the center of these crises, we're bombarded with policing and criminalization and told these are the only tools that can keep our community safe. For nearly 30 years, the Department of Justice has been investigating local police departments and mandating reforms that have not changed the long-term realities of the people living in the cities they're investigating. The reforms they've historically mandated only further entrench policing in our communities, rather than uprooting and policing criminalization as a failed strategy for public safety. In Phoenix, community members have been organizing to protect themselves from the violence of policing for decades. Many victims of police violence and organizations, people that included, have fought for reforms to policing practices and policies, have worked with the city council members and police department leadership to increase accountability and transparency. We've learned the hard way that these reforms and relationships will not end police violence or change our everyday realities with policing. We know that as long as the city of Phoenix and Phoenix Police Department continue to create the conditions for Black, Indigenous, Brown, and sheltered, disabled, and young people to be harassed, ticketed, and criminalized, police will continue to incarcerate, surveil, harm, and kill community members. We've come to accept there is no magic combination of federal investigations, reform committees, changes to training, or new police management that can change that. We believe this is because policing is not broken. Violence, harassment, ongoing civil rights violations is policing operating exactly as it was designed, and therefore can never fully be eradicated without dismantling the system itself. If the DOJ is serious about protecting Phoenix residents from the violence of the Phoenix Police Department, they must fundamentally shift the reforms they mandate in our city. There can be no band-aids that expand the scope, scale, or funding of the Phoenix Police Department, and no mandates that include expanding tools, tech, or policies that will increase criminalization and incarceration. Instead, the DOJ must take steps to actively reduce the role police are playing in our communities. And Phoenix City Council must relocate the hundreds of millions of dollars from the billion-dollar Phoenix police budget to invest in the resources Phoenix residents need to thrive. Affordable housing, mental health care, access to good paying jobs, healthy food, green spaces, basic ass human rights is what we're asking for. Reformation is not a goal, nor should it be anyone's. What we need is to fundamentally transform our community's everyday experiences, and that will never happen through policing or criminalization. We need to create new people-centered systems if we want to live healthy, safe, and prosperous lives. Abolition is the only way forward. Abolish the police and police violence.